As we gather from places across the country and the globe, we honor and recognize Indigenous peoples of our homelands. Together, we acknowledge the history of genocide and ongoing systemic inequities while respecting treaties made on this territory as a step towards reconciliation and strengthening relationship with Indigenous peoples. We give thanks to the past, present, and future stewards of this land and respect all tribal nations' sovereignty and right to self-determination. We aim to hold ourselves and the ASEE community accountable to tribal nations. We would also like to take a moment to recognize Pride Month and the contributions of our colleagues in the LGBTQ+ community. ASEE supports the community through published scholarship about LGBTQ+ people in STEM. We offer safe zone training at conferences, including this one. And we have an LGBTQ+ focused virtual community of practice. We thank our LGBTQ+ colleagues for strengthening ASEE through their contributions to advance enduring education. As always, ASEE has many sponsors and many supporters. I do just quickly want to make you aware that we have, as a part of our 130th anniversary, our 130th anniversary gala. It will be October 10th at the Omni Shore in Washington, D.C., so you should be receiving communications about that. We would love to have you join us and help celebrate ASEE. One of the things we will celebrate at the gala is our Hall of Fame nominees, so Hall of Fame nominations are open. Please take the time to nominate your fellow ASEE members in your divisions, your institutions, your sections, your zones, your councils, to be sure that they get recognized. As always, the ASEE conference features many outstanding talks, discussions, panels, and sessions by you, our ASEE members. I want to highlight just a couple of these, particularly those that may be of interest for those of you who are working on DEI-related efforts that are now being impacted by new legislation. These are by no means the only sessions focused on these topics, but we did want to be sure that you were aware of these. So the interdivisional town hall meeting this year will be focused on 3 topics: sustainability, AI, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. That takes place this afternoon. There will be a DEI roundtable on Wednesday afternoon, focused on strategies for DEI programs and issues related to affirmative action in higher education. So again, you can see the time and location of that there. We will also have an AI roundtable at that point in time for those of you who are interested in ways to incorporate AI into your curriculum. And then, of course, ASEE's Commission on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion offers a suite of fantastic programs. They will also have a roundtable among other sessions. If you will click on that QR code, it will take you to a website that will show all of the Commission's sessions at this particular conference. So before we continue, I do want to give a heartfelt thanks to ASEE sponsors. I believe we have about 39 sponsors this year, which is fantastic. We'll show them on the screen. I'm not going to read all of their names, but we do want to thank them very much for their support in help making the conference a success. So at the host level, University of Maryland. At the co-host level, premier institutional partner level, visionary level, innovator level, our pioneer level partners, mentor level partners, at the leader level, and at the educator level. Please join me in thanking our sponsors. Every year, ASEE elects a new class of fellows. The grade of fellow is one of unusual professional distinction. It is conferred by the Board of Directors upon an ASEE member with outstanding and extraordinary qualifications, experience in engineering or engineering technology education or an allied field, and contributions to ASEE. I'm going to ask that you hold your applause until I've read all of the names of this year's honorees. So this year's newest ASEE Fellows: Karen N. Bursick, University of Pittsburgh; Adam Carberry, Arizona State University; Alan Chevelle, Bucknell University; Jacqueline El Said, American Society for Engineering Education; Christine Grant, North Carolina State University; Pamela S. Latera Purdue, Towson University; Yvette Pearson, University of Texas, Dallas; Denise R. Simmons, University of Florida; and Nadir Yilmaz, Howard University. Please join me in honoring our colleagues with this well-deserved distinction. At this time, we would like to recognize a longtime noteworthy member of ASEE, Frank Croft. This marks Frank's 50th consecutive ASEE annual conference. Absolutely amazing. So I want to take just a few minutes and talk to you about an initiative that I have been helping lead this year called Weaving Students into Engineering Instead of Weeding Them Out. I talked about this at last year's annual conference, and there's been a number of activities this year around this as well. So I want to talk a little bit about it and give you a bit of an update. What I really want to do is start out by looking at the data around diversity and equity in STEM. What does the data say about the need? What does the data say about the gap between where we are and where we need to be? What does it say about the impact that we would see if, in fact, we could realize those goals? After I do that, I want to talk about how do we go about then flipping the equation. So let's look at the need. Again, I'm not going to give you all the data. I don't have time this morning. I'm just going to give you some snapshots of data that look at this. So what is the need for diversity and equity in STEM? Well, data from World Economic Forum, this is not a mystery. We know that we're in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, the digital age. We know that the economies of the future are going to be those STEM industries, like engineering and computer science, that drive technological advancement. Just one piece of data looking at workforce needs, because all of this industrial revolution means that we've got, the digital age means that we've got huge workforce needs. Demand for computer scientists and data analysts are going to outpace supply in the next 18 months. Probably not a mystery. I bet you already know that. I also bet that you already know that there's huge workforce needs in engineering and computing. At my own institutions, we have every week industries contacting us wanting graduates, but our students are already all employed. So we already are seeing huge workforce needs associated with these changes. In the last 30 years, STEM employment in the U.S. has already grown a lot, 79%. That's a huge amount. And these emerging Industry 4.0 technologies, things like quantum computing, artificial intelligence, these are going to be the technologies that position STEM-proficient nations to lead in innovation-based competitiveness. So it's essential that our nation produce the talent that we need to do so. Again, just one data point, if you look at Massachusetts today, 40% of all employment in the state of Massachusetts revolves around STEM innovation industries. Things like clean energy, IT, defense, and advanced manufacturing. In 2021, UNESCO issued a report on engineering capacity, again, looking at this need for engineering workforce. They noted, again, the insufficient capacity. We're not producing enough engineering and engineering technology graduates to meet workforce needs. They also noted the lack of diversity in engineering. Again, shouldn't be a surprise, it's been a problem for decades. They noted that engineering, in fact, is absolutely critical to our resilience and our ability to solve climate change, urbanization, health of oceans and forests, among many other challenges. And in fact, if we want engineering to realize its full potential, we have to ensure both an inclusive and a gender-balanced profession. So the bottom line of all of this, we have huge workforce needs in the engineering profession, and meeting these is going to be absolutely key if we want a successful, resilient economy for our nation. It is also going to be key if we have any hope of solving our world's increasingly complex problems. So the data says we have a huge, huge need. So what about the gap between where we are and where we need to be in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion in engineering? Well, you already know that we're not there. But I wanted to pull some data to just help you understand how far off the mark we are. The National Science Board, in their Vision 2030 report, noted that if the science and engineering workforce would be representative of the U.S. population, if we wanted that to happen by 2030, that's 6.5 years from now, we would have to double the number of women in the science and engineering workforce in the U.S. The number of African Americans would have to increase by 2.5 times. The number of Hispanics have to triple. In the workforce, we're not talking about students, we're not talking about graduates, we're talking about the entire workforce. In the next 6.5 years, that's not going to happen. It gets worse. If you look at data on U.S. college students and faculty diversity, and this is institution-wide, this is not just in engineering. If we looked at the data in engineering, it would be much worse. At the current pace of change, it will take 300 years for U.S. college students to reflect the percent of Native American and blacks in the U.S. population. 300 years. Are we making progress? Well, no, not really. The story gets worse. If you look at faculty diversity, at the current pace of change, it will take 1,000 years for college faculty in the United States to reflect the diversity of the U.S. population. It gets worse. At R1 institutions, at the current pace of change, they will never reflect the diversity of the U.S. population in their faculty. So the answer is infinity. So are we making change? Not really. Certainly not enough change, not fast enough to help us with all the needs we just saw. On top of that, you add the fact that we are in the midst of a 2-decade decline in U.S. birth rate. So we have fewer and fewer kids graduating from high school every year. At the same time, that population increasingly looks like the very groups that we do a very poor job of attracting. Women have outnumbered men in college 2-to-1 for the last decade. 8 years ago, U.S. public kindergarten classes were majority minority for the first time in U.S. history. So not only do we have an increasingly shrinking pool of students from which to draw, but that pool increasingly looks like the very students that for the past 3 to 4 decades, despite effort, we really haven't made any progress in moving the needle and attracting them. So if you put that together, it's a pretty bad story. We aren't attracting or retaining the historically underrepresented students in engineering or engineering technology. We aren't benefiting from the innovation they bring. And at the same time, we're facing huge increases in workforce needs and a declining population in the U.S. So this gap is a huge threat to engineering and engineering education. When I talk about this to faculty, I say, if you'd like a job, if you want your institution to still be here, we have got to solve this problem. So what about the impact? What if, in fact, I had a magic wand, I could wave it today, and I could fill that gap in? What would that be like? Well, first of all, we would see some significant impact on communities and society, because engineering degrees provide the opportunity to increase economic and social mobility of families and communities for generations, which, by the way, benefits everybody. When we limit who gets to do engineering, who gets to design influential and widespread technologies, I don't know, think about AI, for example, we end up with poor decisions that negatively impact our lives, our safety, and our well-being. But there's a huge economic impact as well. This data comes from the World Economic Forum Davos 2023 report. It's not a mystery. Typical STEM workers earn more than double what non-STEM workers earn. Engineering and computer science are going to see the fastest growth and highest paid jobs of the future, just like they do right now. You may have heard that diverse teams are better at solving complex problems than teams that all are the same. Did you know that diverse teams make better decisions 87% of the time? On top of that, a diverse workforce is 70% more likely to capture additional markets, which consequently drives profits. But there's more. If we just look at increasing women's participation in STEM, again, just one data snapshot. This comes from the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report. It would boost women's earnings worldwide by $299 billion. Yes, that's billion with a B, in the next 10 years. That's $30 billion a year. Not surprisingly, that would expedite global economic development and spur economic growth. We are crazy for limiting who gets to do engineering. Why are we doing this? It makes no economic sense at all. So the bottom line, increasing diversity in engineering would have significant global impact in economic growth, in development, in innovation, and it would help elevate the socioeconomic status of families and communities. So we've got to figure out how to flip the equation. I mean, we've been working on this for 20 to 30 years. We've not made any progress. We've got to change things. How do we go about doing that? Well, that's been the goal of this Weaving Students into Engineering Instead of Weeding Them Out project. I mean, for much of its history, it's no mystery. Engineering has worked to weed out all but the perceived brightest and best, with the sincere belief that, the majority of students who wanted to become an engineer simply didn't have what it takes. Many of you were there, right? You started college and they said, look to your left, look to your right, two of you won't be here in 4 years, right? That kind of stuff, and things that were worse. Thank goodness, in the intervening years, I was a college student many decades ago, we have broadened our view of which students have potential to become engineers. Some of those more overt practices we've dropped. And yet, if you take the lid off many of the structures, the policies, the mindsets, the traditions, the approaches that we use in engineering education today, they still perpetuate the weed-out philosophy. You see, what we do is, in higher ed, we tend to recruit, admit, retain, and graduate students who've enjoyed the most pre-college opportunity and the preparation and background that provides. We use opportunity as a proxy for ability, but they're not the same thing. So we admit and graduate students that have medium to high opportunity and kind of average ability, and yet there are students out there with average to high ability that we don't even let in the door because they lacked pre-college opportunity. And of course, students who lack pre-college opportunity often do so through no fault of their own. A rural, first-generation, low socioeconomic kid can't do anything about their lack of opportunity. They're going to make their school system offer math and science at a high-quality level. They're going to provide extracurricular activities. They're going to be able to change their family's socioeconomic level so mom and dad can take them to robotics camp. No, they can't do anything about that. So we have kids with ability. They lack opportunity, often through no fault of their own, that they can't fix. And so we don't let them in the door. Doesn't make any sense. And of course, on top of that, historically underrepresented students often lack opportunity because of things like implicit biases, stereotypes, and other societal norms that either discourage them or filter them out of the opportunity pipelines. I mean, I'm a woman, right? I distinctly remember being told in no uncertain terms on multiple occasions that I didn't belong here. Last year I shared the fact that I was poorly prepared when I got to college in terms of math, because I didn't have a great math background in high school. By the way, I have a PhD in math and a lifetime 4.0 average, graduated from an Arvin institution. I had ability. What I lacked was pre-college opportunity. and neither I or my parents could do anything about that. So think of all the talent that we're wasting. We have to change how we recruit, admit, educate, and graduate students so that we're nurturing interest and ability in engineering, that we embrace the assets that they bring, because they do bring assets, even if they've got deficits in other areas, they bring assets. We need to capitalize on those. And we've got to create personalized pathways and on-ramps for students so that students with engineering ability have their success fostered and supported, and that we support their persistence and graduation instead of forcing their attrition. And by the way, don't tell me this doesn't work. Campbell University does this. We just graduated our 4th class. We're ABET accredited. Our kids go to work for all kinds of Fortune 100, 200, and 500 companies. Half of my freshman class have internships, many of them at Fortune 100 companies. Yes, you can do this. So I always have to say this. I'm not talking about lowering standards. I'm not talking about lowering quality of graduates. That's a huge disservice to the students we serve and the employers that hire them. What I am talking about is setting appropriate expectations and helping students meet those expectations instead of expecting them to walk in the door already possessing the knowledge, skills, and background to do so. To quote Daniel Greenstein, who is the Chancellor of the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, it's time to stop expecting college-ready students and become student-ready colleges. So we've worked on this this year, this project, trying to help institutions come up with ways to use evidence-based practices around recruiting, admissions, onboarding, skill development, instruction, advising, et cetera. We partnered with IRVA, the Engineering Research Visioning Alliance, this year to collect student voices. We partnered with the National Academy of Engineering, thanks to a grant from the National Science Foundation, and had expert panels in to talk about issues and evidence-based programs. We've had focus groups that many of you have been involved in this year to help us evaluate and develop a draft framework. And we'll be pursuing additional funding to help further evaluate that framework and bring it to fruition with some pilot programs. So if you're interested in learning more information, let me know. Bottom line, broadening access is critical to the future of engineering as a profession. We have to stop filtering for pre-college opportunity and preparation and start recruiting, admitting, and educating for ability and interest. It's time to welcome the nation's diverse array of students into engineering and to provide the supporting and thriving environments that they need to become outstanding engineers. Thank you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. As we know, ASEE is the leading society for engineering education because of the involvement of members who dedicate their careers to advancing scholarship. Dr. Darryll J. Pines, president of the University of Maryland College Park, illustrates how one person's dedication can advance engineering education for our nation, the very things we've been talking about this morning. He arrived at the University of Maryland in 1995 as an assistant professor. He served then as chair of the Department of Aerospace Engineering from 2006 to 2009, and then for the next 11 years as dean of the A. James Clark School of Engineering, where he was the Nerman Farben Professor of Aerospace Engineering. Dr. Pines has made diversity a hallmark of his tenure, increasing the number of faculty and students from underrepresented populations. With his leadership team, he has secured a historic $219 million investment to fund need-based scholarships campus-wide, as well as graduate fellowships, faculty positions, infrastructure, and other initiatives. His long and distinguished career includes many other accomplishments. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Pines.
Well, good morning, everyone. How you doing? Nice to see you all here in Baltimore. You know, I've been fighting to get this conference in Baltimore my entire 28 years. And it's taken me to become president for that to happen. And I'm happy. I'm happy to see you all here in Baltimore. So this is Baltimore. Welcome to the Inner Harbor. I hope you get out of this convention center and see the Inner Harbor, see the National Aquarium, see the Museum of Science, see some of the major venues that are around. This actually, I really would call it it's an engineering marvel, the Inner Harbor, because it wasn't really just an industrial area that they reimagined that it could be what you see today. So it is a part of great civil engineering, great mechanical engineering, electrical engineering that has gone on in the harbor. So get out and see the Inner Harbor, and welcome again to Baltimore. So I want to share in the discussion about our great College of Engineering, A. James Clark School of Engineering. So our Dean, Sam, just wave your hand. Dean Sam Graham, give him a round of applause for also hosting this conference here. Sam is a mechanical engineer. He tried to get you all to come down to see an incredible facility at College Park, and I wish if you ever come back to the state of Maryland, you come back and see this brand new facility. It's like none in the country. It's called the Idea Factory. It's a vision of any student on campus can come into this facility with an idea. They don't have to be an engineer. They don't have to be a scientist. They just have an idea. What we found on our campus was there's so many students that had ideas but didn't know how to realize because they were not engineers like you or computer scientists or programmers, and we wanted to create a space that was eclectic, that would cause disruptive collisions of disciplines, and that is, in fact, the Idea Factory. And to do that, we hired this incredible person, Amir Ansari. Many of you might have heard of the X Prizes. Anybody heard of the X Prizes? Right? Yes, give a round of applause for the X Prizes. The very first X Prize was called the Ansari X Prize, and it was for commercial space launch. That's actually how SpaceX got started, Virgin Galactic got started, and they're still alive today because of Mr. Ansari and his family. So we've hired him because he was so innovative to actually lead this new center. In addition, how many of you had any Maryland crab cakes? Just raise your hand. Congratulations. Was it good? I hope it was good to you. All right, comes from real Maryland crabs. That is where you are in the state of Maryland. It's an indigenous food, the Maryland blue crab, which comes from the Chesapeake Bay, that you all have had. But what you didn't know, that there's an ingredient in the exoskeleton of the crab called chitin that can be used and sort of processed to make something called chitosan. And chitosan can be used as an electrolyte in lithium-ion batteries. That is the research that was just featured on the Baltimore Sun last Wednesday. I wish it was this week, so you could have had a copy of the newspaper. But it was last week, Wednesday, and the faculty member who did that is Professor Liang Bing Hu, who's the director of the Center for Materials Innovation, and he's taking shells from crabs, Maryland blue crabs, grinding them up and using the chitin and converting the chitosan and use it as an electrolyte for lithium-ion batteries, and actually has a higher power density and a higher energy density. And it's just whether you can do that sustainable. And of course, you know, they just go to waste, but they're also biodegradable. It's making the batteries biodegradable. So that's pretty impressive, happening in Dean Graham's College. That's right. And we're also working on all kinds of activities related to robotics, both in the water and on the air and in the ground. Our University of Maryland team just won the NIST UAS First Responders Challenge, claimed first place 2 consecutive years, 2021, the Indoor Challenge, and then 2022, the Search and Rescue Challenge. And in addition, we have folks who are working on underwater robotics to actually do some environmental sensing research to make sure the Chesapeake Bay is not getting polluted. So that, and also making sure that oysters are protected because it's another ingredient that comes from the Chesapeake Bay. And then finally, we have a startup called Ion Storage Systems that is also doing well, that is getting some venture capital money to move forward in hopefully an initial public offering. So we're very excited about the work that goes on in the Clark School. So thank you, Dean Graham, and all of my colleagues and faculty who are here at this conference. So now let's get to what I want to talk about. So President Carpenter, I mean, you said it best. We need to really use all of our talent pool in the United States. So my talk is to talk about where I think engineering education has arrived, and I hope you will see this when I use this term called the empathetic engineer. But first, this is the perfect storm. Part of it was said by President Carpenter, but there are rapid changes in technology, new generation of students, and how is this new landscape evolving, and how will you have to respond? So that brings us to today. So first, let's talk about some of these challenges that you just heard from Jen. I'm going to go this really quickly because she's already mentioned it. So the number of high school students are going down. This is the number of high school students that graduate every year. And you see that little red curve is starting to decline. And we draw only 3 to 4% of those students who graduate, 3 million or so who graduate from high school every year, into our college programs in engineering. So what does that mean? That means that roughly we are drawing about 120,000 to 150,000 every year. But notice that in the last, this is, by the way, this is ASEE data, President Carpenter. This is ASEE data, your data. It's going down. The freshman enrollment in engineering is going down. Now, a lot of folks are going into computer science. I'm just doing engineering, not computer science. So that's important for you to know, that most of our students who are interested in STEM or interested in engineering are starting to now flock from high school into computer science. So that's what's happening in the freshman enrollment. But now look at total enrollment. We had this wonderful trend in the mid-2010s, and now, as we see, it has peaked, and it's about, this is total enrollment now in all of colleges of engineering in the United States, at least that's compiled by the ASEE database, that includes Canada, of course. It's starting to go down. So this should worry all of you. Yet at the same time, as you heard from President Carpenter, the demographics of the U.S. are changing. So this shows you 2019 to 2036, and you see that the diversity of populations that are going to graduate from high school, this is graduation at high school, is changing and will change over the next decade. So we must bring in these diverse populations from rural, urban, suburban America to go into our great field of engineering. Not surprisingly, all of your universities, just like mine, have increased the tuition, in-state, out-of-state, public or private. Look at that rapid increase. That's not going to help. That's not going to help get more students to come to our institutions. So this is, again, a rising storm that's causing us all some anguish and some stress. A crisis is also, because those tuition is going up, we see that the debt for students has been rising. And that debt is going to, and combined with the tuition increase, burden students once they graduate from our institutions. So again, this is another problem. Thank God it's plateaued. So fortunately, the debt is plateauing, which is really good to see. But a crisis like this is also affected by household income. So what we see in 1970 is that 62% of household incomes in the United States were called middle class or middle income. That is now reduced to only 43%. And notice that the wealthy, the upper income, has gone from 29% to 48% of the amount of available income to afford to pay for that tuition at our respective universities. That means that the middle class is stressed to actually pay for the education of their children. So you have all of these factors that are affecting whether we are going to get that diverse class of engineering students into our colleges and schools that President Carpenter was referring to. However, the good news is also what President Carpenter was referring to, is that engineering, and this is the data on if you got a high school diploma compared to if you got a college degree, and it's not even an engineering degree, it's just a college degree, whether you will move yourself from the lowest quintile of the socioeconomic spectrum of the United States. So if you were a high school diploma and you were at that 30% class of students, or your family was in the lowest quintile socioeconomically, you will move yourself, or more than half of you, or about half of you will move yourself out of that category if you get a college degree. So don't let anybody tell you that a college degree is not valuable, because I'm not even giving you the engineering numbers. If these were engineering numbers, this would be like 80% would move out of that quintile, or 90% would move out of that quintile. This is just average for an average high school degree and an average college degree. So this is important, because people have been saying that it's not worthy to get a college degree. Of course it is. Don't let them tell you that. Now, another part of this story is the rapid changes in technology. So if you are as old as me, or older, you know who you are. You even use the slide rule. This is my HP calculator. I used the slide rule for 1 year as a freshman at UC Berkeley, and then we got converted. Thank God for that, by the way, just to say. And it was so funny. I want you to bring you back to this if you're my age or older. Everybody was afraid of the HP 35. And then the next generation, that it could do functions, and you could do that in class? The teachers were panicked. Do you think they're panicked today? They were panicked, just as panicked then when that came out. So look, we have always used technology to enhance learning, right? So what's happening today? Now, this is unfortunately a terrible chart for you to say, but this is 20th century innovations caused by engineering. Many of you in the room and some of you way beyond this time. So this is what made learning easier. So now we have clean water, right? This is penetration of technologies from 20th century innovations into U.S. households. So the flushing toilet, electric power, electricity in general, household appliances, the television, all of this has made our lives better and the ability in our business to educate people, right? That's 20th century technology. What has been happening in the 21st century? A rapid rise in digital technology. If there's a person in this room, raise your hand if you don't have a cell phone. I'm looking for you. I don't see you. All of you, that's the penetration of technology. If you're in this room, I know you have access to the internet because you're all engineers, first of all. It's very simple. But it tells you what has happened just in the 21st century. So cell phones, computer, the internet, smart. Now, the other parts, some people have the old cell phones that are not as smart. So there's only been penetration of 80% of the U.S. households that have smartphones and the ability to send information back and forth. Tablets have been used in classrooms. The Kindle, electric book readers have been used. This says that time to reach 100 million users in the U.S., Instagram, 30 months. TikTok, 9 months. Zoom, because you had to. You remember, March of 2020, in 1 week, you were a Zoom expert. 6 months, right? You remember that? And it's funny, I tell people at my school that no way could I have gotten 100% of my faculty to go virtual. I would have been fired if it wasn't for the pandemic. Thank God for the pandemic. It just did a lot for all of us. All right. All right. So now that we have this wonderful technology, who are we educating? These young people. They're different than you and I, at least people as old as me. They're different. This is Generation Z. You all know that. Now, here's the interesting thing. It was an epiphany in me in like 2021 or 2020. Yeah, it was like 2019. And I realized, oh my God, these young people were born in 2001. They don't even know anything about the 20th century. In fact, one day I was saying something about 9/11. They were like, what is that, 9/11? I'm like, oh my God, these are 21st century human beings who didn't live through certain things, right? So anyway, this is Generation Z. And one important thing that you all know about them is that they're digital natives, right? They started with Instagram and Facebook and all the social media that you didn't start with, right? All of us older people. They're always online. Just look at any one of your campuses. It drives me nuts because they're always online, right? I'm talking to them in my classroom. I say, please put your social media stuff down. Let's have a conversation, right? But one thing's true about this generation. They want to make a difference. They're very socially connected. They care about their wellness. I mean, their broad wellness, and of course, specifically their mental wellness, right? But they want to make a difference just like all of us. They're comfortable with ubiquitous devices because they have them all the time. They're comfortable with social media. They know how to learn on digital devices. Unlike us, they've been educated on digital devices. But most importantly, this mental wellness is very important. However, they have different attitudes than you and I. They have different work attitudes. My 2 children are 27 and 25. My daughter wants to work remotely. I might go in every now and to the office. It's actually a good thing for you, but she works like 3 days remotely. They have different career expectations. They are learning about different management styles, but they're definitely socially connected and socially conscious, right? And they have a great knowledge of technology. If I want to get something done, I just talk to my children, and they figure out all my hang-ups on digital technology, even though I'm an engineer. All right, now the learning is different, folks. You know it, and I know it. This is how I learned on the left. How many people have learned this way? That was just to see how old you are. It worked. You know, blackboard, white piece of chalk, right? Professors lectured on the black or whiteboard. Homework was defined. No internet. Hey, we had no internet, no email, right? We had to go to the professor's office to ask questions. That's okay. Still okay today, by the way, right? However, today's education, thanks to actually the pandemic too, you know, we have really high-quality virtual learning, high-quality online lectures and videos now, online homeworks, clickers and tablets and all kinds of other devices, new software tools, great blended learning environment, right? So it's really exciting because we can do innovative things. We can be more coaches to our students. But let's talk about, you know, the history. So all of these are challenges, right? We have the challenges of what's happening that President Carpenter talked about. We have the challenges of emerging technology. How are we going to use this technology? But let's see how engineering education over time has adapted. By the way, that's a real picture from University of Maryland, 1900. Those are real engineers with real stuff. So how did we evolve? Believe it or not, engineering started out of a desire, as the first field was civil engineering. And believe it or not, it started because the military, they needed to be roads and bridges and things like that. So it actually started at West Point, believe it or not. It's no hard for you to imagine. But it started in 1802 at the U.S. Military Academy in West Point. Then there was a university in Norwich in New England in which the first civil engineering degree was offered in 1819, and then RPI became the first real private, using French learning from the French to actually develop a curriculum in engineering. But the real big expansion, this is why ASEE is 130 years old today, was the following. Was the Morrow Act of 1862. The Morrow Act said, offered states land to form colleges that included agriculture, engineering, and military tactics, which is why many of you have ROTC programs still today, just like why I have ROTC programs today. But this is how the majority of public institutions in the United States grew engineering programs that are exactly, roughly 130 years old, like ASEE. Because this is what happened, was the Morrow Act. And then the Morrow Act was reconstituted in 1890 to do it at HBCUs, and then later in 1994 to do it at historically tribal universities and colleges across the United States. But this was the large first push for growth of engineering education across the nation. So this is how it actually evolved. Then what did we do? Here's a timeline of the various changes, how I see them across the 130 years of engineering. So first, remember, the first discipline was civil engineering. And it started out of the concept of doing it for the Civil War in the United States, where we were building bridges and blowing up bridges and highways as the two sides fought one another. And the first professional society, even ahead of ASEE, was the American Society of Civil Engineering. It started way before everybody else did because that was the first discipline. And then you look at the top row there. We started purely from a perspective of practice. You know, these shop skills that I showed you, that images of those students in the 1900s. Then we went from shop skills to more analytical skills. We started to understand about materials and mechanics. Statics became a common course. In fact, departments of mechanics across the United States, who have now disappeared across the United States, were evolving. Why? Because the theory and science of mechanical engineering and mechanics and civil engineering was being developed. That led to theory and science, fundamental, basic, that students were learning. Then we transitioned somewhere around the 70s and 80s into project-based learning. So Worcester Polytechnic, I'm going to give you a shout out because you were the first school that decided that project-based learning was important, and you were right. And all of us followed right behind you because we gave students hands-on skills to actually really learn the art form of engineering and practice. And then, huge expansion in modern and complex system analysis as we incorporated science into engineering, medical stuff into engineering, and the emergence of more hands-on learning experiences with experiential learning opportunities, active-based learning, service-based learning, working in large sets of teams. Most of us have introductory engineering courses that are team-based. That wasn't true just 60 years ago. But this is the evolution, and now we are here at the American Society of Engineering Education Conference, and one of the major innovations, and I have to give a shout out to Purdue's very own former Dean, Leah Jamison. Give her a round of applause, please. Leah was the first person, well, not the first person, but the first dean to launch a Department of Engineering Education in the country. And now there are, I think, more than 10 around the United States and many centers across the United States that work on the art form of pedagogy, experiential learning experiences. How can we integrate and give better experience? How do we change the way engineering's been taught so we can bring in more diverse populations that President Carter was speaking about? So this is the evolution of our field, and we always adapt. We always adapt to the technology, and we always adapt to the learning modalities that we need for the era that we're in. So we're in another era, is what I'm getting at. So here's where we come from. We come from practice, theory and science, design, modern practices, and we've been doing that to create these engineers who have common desires. They are problem definers, they are problem solvers, they are flexible engineers, better able to straddle uncertainty, risk, disparity, disciplines, cultures, ethics now, evolving technologies, as I told you. And many of you, like me, have innovation and entrepreneurship programs to give them that creativity, that opportunity to truly innovate in this space. And they have stronger application skills. They're also multidimensional. We give them technical skills now, we give them communication skills and all of your project-based learning experiences. Social skills is key. Global awareness, that's new. Many of you have global programs. Intercultural competence is key, getting them to understand nationalities, ethnicities, religion, and how it affects how they make decisions in country, out of country. So, what's going to happen today then? What are we doing? So, bear with me, this is my perspective, and it doesn't have to be your perspective. We've come from this era of how different decades have defined the engineering that was done. And this is just my looking, because I think these conditions of military and contexts that are political, geopolitical, affect the type of engineer that has been produced. So the Soviet threat, the Japanese threat was more manufacturing. So don't think of these are all military. The demographic threat of what's happening across the globe, the global threat, the environmental threat of climate change, the Chinese threat, which we have been dealing with for more than a decade, and now you just dealt with the pandemic and the info wars that are happening because of the sort of use of information in both a negative and positive way. So what is that going to produce? In my opinion, that has produced the following types of engineer: the scientific engineer, the transactional engineer, the managerial engineer, the global engineer, the elite engineer, and today, I argue, we're in an era of the empathetic engineer, taking into society's context what's happening to the environment, what's happening to real people socially, how can we engineer better solutions? That's what we're going to ask our kids to do, our students to do. So what is the empathetic engineer? Engineers are increasingly expected to consider the societal and ethical implications of their work, have strong interpersonal skills with cultural sensitivity, and focus on sustainability and social responsibility in their projects. I believe that is what we have to do. And I think President Dan Moto, former president of the National Academy, said it best, that engineering is global, a global enterprise, and a century-long vision must view engineering globally, but most importantly, that engineering and engineering solutions are defined by 4 words: creation, solutions that are technical, so the technical part, and then people and society, which is the user part of the human part. So I think he has best articulated what it means to be an empathetic engineer. He said this in 2019 at a talk that he gave, and I believe he was right. Creation, you can define engineering solutions by creation, solutions, people, and society. That's what we all do, but we have to remember that people and society side that makes it gives us empathy about the concerns of all people. Now, that was born out of the grand challenges for engineering and the 14 grand challenges that were developed back in 1998. But because of the pandemic, it's put an critical focus on really what engineers were producing from our institutions going forward. And we've used experiential learning as an opportunity with that grand challenge context to really get them to be more empathetic. So what you see here on the left side, you see Grand Challenge Scholar Schools and their growth. There's over 100 Grand Challenge Scholar Schools, and they do these 5 interdisciplinary areas. They do research, interdisciplinarity, global experience, entrepreneurship, and service learning. And it's really creating more of an empathetic engineer related to those grand challenges. And on the right, you see how many students have graduated from those Grand Challenge Scholar programs around the United States. This is courtesy of Dr. Janis Yotsowitz, who's the Dean of Engineering at USC. I'm going to skip that, and go into what are some 21st century grand challenges that are happening for all of us. Of course, climate change, global health, racial and social justice, threats to our democracy, pandemic preparedness, water accessibility, food insecurity, sustainability, clean and renewable energy, disinformation that was not on their original list, that's new, future cities, ethical, fair, and trustworthy technology that was not on their list, that's in a new 21st century issue that didn't occur in the 20th century. So these are challenges that we are trying to educate our next generation, I call empathetic engineers. They still are problem definers and problem solvers. They're comfortable with uncertainty, risks, cultures, ethics, and evolving technologies. They're prepared for creativity, innovation, management, and public policy leadership. That's new. They're fluent in the application skills and theoretical strengths, but most importantly, they are socially connected to their environment and their communities. All right, now how do we do this going forward with new opportunities? So, as I told you, I started off with the HP 35 calculator. You went, like me, if you're in my age bracket, went to a laptop. You went to Zoom in 2020. And now a new fun tool has come into your language. You didn't know this 6, 7 months ago, but you know it today, ChatGPT. And we're at ChatGPT 4, by the way, just to let you know that. So now you're all worried about ChatGPT. But if you were my age, you were worried about the calculator about 40 years ago. 40 years ago, they were worried about the calculator. 40 years later, they were worried about ChatGPT. Everyone calm down. It's a new tool. We're going to learn how to use this tool, right? But it's amazing the penetration of this technology and how fast it went to 1 million users. So look at Netflix. To 1 million users took 3.5 years. Kickstarter, 2.5 years. Twitter, 2 years. ChatGPT, 5 days. This is the fastest moving technology to adoption by humans in history. 100 million users in less than 3 months. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So AI is here, everyone. Don't be afraid of it. Learn it. I'm sure you're all engineering people. I'm sure you all have used ChatGPT. You probably even did your talks in ChatGPT, because you could do that. You know that, right? I didn't do my talk in ChatGPT. Just letting you know. I'm straight up Darryll Pine. But you could do it. Okay, but what I want to tell you about, so it's not just about the technology. It's about we have to now dig deeper, as President Carter said, into building the ecosystem to ensure that you have engineering students coming to your institutions and that the nation benefits from its economic work and the workforce that's required. So my colleagues and I who are in the room, we are part of a program called Engineering for Us All. It essentially tries to demystify engineering for every high school student. It's an engineering curriculum and a teacher professional development and training program that we have demonstrated works all across the country. We now have over 80 teachers trained, and not all of them are in STEM. In fact, many of them are history and English teachers. We have 6,000 students that have been educated. We have delivered this in 19 states, the District of Columbia, and the United States territories. And some of your institutions, 18 to be exact, give credit or placement across the United States. But this is how we can build the pipeline for the future. Just one example. This is where we are. The sort of gold color is states and territories where we have E4USA high schools, and then the green colors is when we have both states that do E4USA high schools, and we have the 18 schools that give credit and placement in those states. We like to be across the entire United States. So what do we do? So here's a picture of a typical class a typical, at a local high school next to the University of Maryland, College Park Academy. We took a picture with the students. We have the Brendan McCarthy as our teacher. He was a history teacher who learned how to teach engineering. The principal is Gordon Libby. Stacy Klein-Garner. Stacy, wave your hand. She's right here, the co-director of Give her a round of applause. Without her leadership, it doesn't happen. In fact, all the E4 USA, just stand up for just a second. Give them all a round of applause. Please stand up. This is the whole team right here. They do excellent work across the nation. And essentially, this is how we're developing K-12 empathetic engineers. So these young people, who are very diverse in that picture, took a trike, a three-wheel cycle for a Down syndrome child, and essentially re-engineered it, and everything had to be adapted. They had to keep the base foundational trike the same, but they added some elements to it. The constraint was no permanent modifications to the bike. Everything had to be replaceable and detached. And they did that, and I just want to show you what they came up with. So if you could play the video, please. So that's the mother and the Down syndrome child. And this is them taking them out to the parking lot to go for their first ride. The extended handle was for the mother to be able to push the Down syndrome child. Giving everybody a fist pump. That's the principal of the school pushing Jacob. All right, you can stop the video now. How about giving them a round of applause? Those are high school students who did all of that engineering, and many of those students, and Dr. Stacy Klein-Garner was there with me, many of our team members were there, and many students came up to us like, I didn't even know that I could do this for someone else. I didn't even know I could be an engineer. I didn't know that this was something that I could use my creativity to help another person. So those are the empathetic engineers that we're trying to develop. And just to show you how well that E4 USA is working, this is a survey we did of 210 seniors who were graduated in spring of 2023. And we asked them, where are you going to school? And 146 said they were going to they were in our program, 146 were going to four-year colleges, 9 to community colleges, 3 to vocational schools, and 1 was on shore. And of the 146, these are the colleges and universities that they're going to. Most of them have E4 USA partnerships with us. Of course, the University of Maryland, which we're obviously the largest on the pie chart, but many other schools around the nation. Now, when we look at what states are these seniors going to? They're going to all states around the United States. So this is really exciting. We've developed a model that actually really works. People get interested in STEM, they get interested in engineering, and they go to your universities. So if you want to learn more, just you want to know how many of them went into STEM. So of the 146, 71% went into STEM, and 29%, or about 30%, went into non-STEM majors, but they went to four-year colleges. And so about 100 of them went into STEM majors, and of this 100, 80 went into engineering, of the 210. So pretty impressive. Now, if you want to learn more about E4 USA, there's a session right after this at 9:15 in M233, and we'll be talking more about that. And yes, Uncle Sam wants you to join E4USA and be a partner university for credit and placement. It's very simple. We can show you how it's done, how all the other 18 schools did it. And we also have another panel session later, also today at 11 a.m. in M394B. So that's my little advertisement. Now, I'm almost done. I'm going to leave you with this last sort of final quote. If your plan for 1 year, if your plan is for 1 year, plant rice. If your plan is for 10 years, plant trees. If your plan is for a whole century, educate children and create empathetic engineers. I added that part. Confucius didn't say that. That was Pine's little addendum. Okay. All right, folks, so let me just wind up here. So as President Carter said, we've got to include everybody in the workforce. That starts in K-12 into your engineering schools. We need to grow that pipeline. We need to find ways to fund them because tuition can't get as high. We need to find ways to retain them. We need to give everyone an opportunity from rural, suburban, urban America to come into our great schools and get the great engineering education that you all got, to be great leaders that you are, and have them have great careers. Society's grand challenges demand for you to do this. I mean, if you can't remember the pandemic, then there's something wrong with you. If you can't remember that terrible year of 2020, then there's something wrong with you. And if that didn't give you a refocus and a reflection of what's important, engineering is important, but it must be done in context. We develop great people. Those great people create solutions for people and society. That's why I believe this is the sort of decade of the empathetic engineer, and all of you can play a role in it. So thank you very much for having me. And I'll show you one last, since I'm an aerospace engineer and I had to do this. This is Chris Huey. He's a Jamaican immigrant who came to College Park and got, he was struggling as an engineering major, got his mechanical engineering degree, got a graduate degree, and went on to work at Virgin Galactic and became one of the 4 astronauts to fly in this vehicle. And he went back to Jamaica to create more engineers by working with students in Jamaica. So this is a perfect example of an empathetic engineer and a great engineer. Thank you very much.
So thank you for joining us for the plenary this morning. Have a great conference. Be sure to check out the division poster sessions next in the exhibit hall, and we'll see you around. Thanks.